Good evening, everyone. This is Professor DeNobili for another titillating episode of Foundations of Development. Um, I am so proud of myself. It is Monday, September 12th. For the first time, I am doing a lecture at the beginning of the week. It is almost 9 o'clock in New York, which is almost 7 p.m. in Wyoming. And this week, we're going to be looking at Montessori and Werner. So a quick look at this week. Due next Sunday is reflection number 2. Who did it better? So you're going to pick two theorists from different modules. However, if you want to do Montessori and Werner, that's acceptable because technically, from the summer version of this course, these were actually two separate, modules. So I will accept Montessori and Werner if you want to look at them and reflect on who you think had the better theory, and obviously back it up. Back up your opinion with facts from the textbook. You can explain how you feel. Explain how you feel. You can apply aspects of both theories in your future practice and education. Your reflection should be about 250 to 500 words, double spaced, which is about 1 to 2 pages, and a little note about word counts. That does not include headings, that does not include titles. If this was a homework assignment, it would not include the reference page. Because this is a reflection, there's no need for APA formatting since it is a reflection, and you can use the I voice. Make sure you have your name on your document. Some of you didn't have your name on either your reflection or your homework assignment one. We'll take a look at the roadmap in a second, and this week we are looking at the works of Montessori and Werner. So Montessori and Werner are here a little bit ways down on the left side. As you can tell, they're indented under Gazelle because they kind of build off of that, especially Montessori, as she is responding to maturization, um, and Gazelle kind of defined maturization in his theory. Werner um, is the child as the organismic. Never going to get that word right on the first try. Organismic thinker, and he really uses what's known as Gestalt psychology, which we'll dive into in a moment. Let me just get my head out of the way so we get to the next slide. So the basics of Montessori. What's interesting about Montessori is two things. She's one of the few female theorists that we're going to see, and she's the only teacher. She's the only one who taught kids. She's the only one who teaches kids in her lifetime. She's the only one that dedicated herself to the actual practice of teaching. She believed that knowledge comes from experience, what she called acting on the world, um, and that development is natural, and so therefore that's why she's on the left side, the organismic orientation of her theory. Curiosity is a natural thing for children. It's not something that you have to like pull out of them. Like they're naturally curious about the world around them. And her theory is extremely child centered. So much so that um, in a Montessori school, they employ fewer teachers than in a traditional school. And most of the job of a Montessori teacher is observing the child. And I'm oversimplifying it, obviously, uh, but you're really leaving the child to their own devices, and then you're there to like jump in when you have to. The Montessori model is about allowing the child to teach themselves for the most part. Um, she's on the left of the roadmap because she is organismic to the core. She believes in letting the child flower on their own, and that don't worry, they're going to get there at some point if you just let them be. Life will find a way. Just let the child do what it has to do. In the Montessori classroom environment, it's filled with so-called stations of learning. That's my term that I'm using. Montessori didn't call them stations, but these so-called stations will have puzzles, blocks, Play-Doh, paints, paper and pen, coloring books, etc. Very, very kinesthetic in nature, because a lot of learning is done by physical doing, physical experience. Um, However, regardless of what is at the physical stations, they're usually formed around five principal curriculum areas: practical life, sensorial, language, mathematics, and culture or geography. Key terms that we're going to be looking in the next few slides: normalization, concentration, productive play, and autonomy. So let's start with normalization. So I just want to let you know these are my definitions of the key Montessorian terms. They may be different from other instructors. I'm trying to simplify them as basic terms. I just want you to really understand them in their most basic form. So you can expand your knowledge of her approach by visiting a Montessori school. I know there's one in Laramie, Wyoming. There is one here where I live in Yonkers, New York. I'm actually going to reach out to them and see if I can visit them if their hours are comparable to my school, where maybe I can go after work, but my school gets out at 4 p.m. here, so probably not, but I'm going to try my best. And there's also thousands of books on the Montessori model. One of the reasons why the Montessori model really has not caught on in a foundational sense, especially in public schools, is because it's very costly. It's very time consuming. However, the Montessori model has always been held up as one of the greatest models for education. Getting back to normalization, normalization is about watching children engage and seeing what kids do normally, and then the normalization process is helping them through their frustrations and approaching those frustrations at their level. In this case, literally, it's sometimes getting on your hands and knees with them and crawling with them. And it's interesting in the sense of, how are you going to be able to explain it from their perspective, not from your perspective? The Montessori model is very much about engaging kids where they're at, not where we want them to be, but allowing them to struggle and letting them know that the struggle is normal and helping them through it, and proposing different solutions, but not doing it for them. I want to share with you. I wanted to share another TikTok video. I put it in the wrong place on here, so I'm gonna put it here. Some of you may have seen this video, but there's the original video, and then there's the redemption video. I don't know if any of you have seen the redemption video, but I wanted to share this with you. I think this is very one, it's very Montessori. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I want you to see the frustration. I don't know if this is genuine frustration, but I can tell you, the inner child in me is getting just as frustrated with her as this is going on. But then looking at the redemption video where she's leading the answers and she's the one, and there's that great satisfaction at the end. So I want you to see this, and this is a very Montessori activity and a very Montessori approach.
This is a square. Can you guess which spot that goes in?
The square.
That's right. It goes in the square hole.
Yes.
And how about this rectangle? That one
Also the square.
it goes in there too.
Yeah.
Up next, we've got this thin rectangle.
The thin
Can you guess
rectangle.
where that goes?
The thin rectangle.
That's right. It goes in the square hole. And up next, a cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole. Now, we've also got the semicircle right here. Do you see a slot that would fit
The semicircle.
semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right. It's the square hole. Okay. Up next, the triangle. We know what hole that goes into,
triangle.
right?
Triangle.
That's right. The square hole. And up next, we have the arch.
The arch. Arch.
You guessed it.
Arch.
It goes in the square hole. This is a rectangle. Can you guess where that goes?
The square.
That's right. The square hole.
Yeah.
Up next, we have a triangle. Do you see a hole that'll fit the triangle?
The triangle.
That's right. The triangle hole. Up next, the circle or cylinder. Can you guess where that goes?
The circle.
That's right. The circle. You also have an arch. That goes in the arch hole. We also have a semicircle.
The semicircle.
Do you see a hole that would fit the semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right. The semicircle. There's a thin rectangle. That goes in the thin rectangle hole. And last, we have a square.
The square.
You guessed it. That's right. The square hole.
So good. I feel great right now. Okay. I would say the only difference is that the full Montessori approach would be the student actually manipulating the blocks themselves. That would be the only difference. Don't do it for them. Let the child struggle through it. Let them work it through it, because if you do it, they're not going to be learning it. They're just going to accept that your answer was the answer that you were looking for them, and that's not the point of the Montessori method. Another thing that she was big on, that she noted, was about concentration. Have you ever heard of the concentration thumb? We've all done it. It's this idea of when you're in deep concentration, you stick your tongue out because you're chewing on that thought. Montessori loved to see it. It can happen in any classroom, but is most prevalent in the Montessori classroom. The child is in the flow of the activity, and they can sometimes be engaged with this learning for long periods of time and not get tired. A bomb could literally go off and the child wouldn't know. They would just keep on working on their assignment, whatever they do, whatever they're engrossed in, because again, curiosity is natural for children. And when they latch onto something, they will latch onto it, and typically they'll keep at it until they're satisfied, and then they'll move on to the next activity. So concentration was very big for Montessori. Then we come to productive play. We're calling this an innovation, but the reason why it's an innovation of Montessori is that she was the first person who documented it and put it down on paper. Even though productive play has been around since the beginning of time, she saw it as critical to learning. So, for example, as you see in the picture, there's a toy oven, and the child may imagine themselves in the role as the learner and later as the teacher, of like, okay, so we're gonna cook dinner. Which way sounds like it would be the quickest way for us to get dinner? Are we gonna cook it on the stove, or are we gonna put it in the microwave? And so the kids are going to fall back on what they know from home. What do their parents do? They'll figure out the answer based on their own experience. The one thing I want to touch upon here as well, that's very big in a Montessori classroom, is that it's not going to be one age level, one grade level like in a traditional school. They're often multi-grade levels, which is it harkens back to the one school schoolroom, which studies have shown There are some schoolrooms left in the United States today, all over the country. They still do exist. They're few and far between, but they're still there. But studies show the closer we get to the schoolroom, the more student, the higher it is for scholastic student achievement. That's what a lot of studies have been showing. And I think that's part of the reason why the Montessori model is very successful. You do have this schoolroom approach, and even more so, it empowers child leadership. Where if it's in like a first, second, third grade classroom, those third grade students are not only students, but they're also teachers for their younger peers. Um, the Montessori classroom encourages it more, this productive play, more than in the traditional classroom environment. And as we said before, one, it's time consuming, and because it's time consuming, it could be more expensive than the traditional classroom. Autonomy is the last thing to look at with Montessori. Children are but adults in the making, where they're on their way. They're not there yet, but they're on their way. They have their own way of going about connecting the dots and learning. Um, and as they learn, they form the synapses in their brains uh, that are unique to each and different. The formation of their synapses are unique to each, different in every way. Montessori would say, let them be themselves, let them learn in their own way, in their own time. Don't force them into convergent thinking. If you looked at the video I had posted, I think it was 1 or 2 modules ago, um, convergent thinking is traditional education. Divergent thinking is really where we want to get the kids to be. But the problem is that divergent thinking is not cost effective. And so unfortunately money talks, and that's pretty much what the um what ends up becoming the foundation of education. Ironically, they'll actually get to the same place, except they'll be better prepared for the world out there because they were able to get it on their own and not have the knowledge force fed to them. This is what is called equifinality. Equa meaning equitable, similar, same, finality, end. So 2 different ways of going about it, but they'll end up in the same place at the end of the day. Autonomy is crucial to all theorists. On the left-hand side, the organismic thinking side, because they believe that development drives learning. They believe that it's the agency of the individual that drives the learning, not outside forces. So Montessori in review, I cover her work in a class like this. What she did was different than most of the other theorists, and a lot of the other theorists, for the most part, feed into the traditional classroom model. Not saying that they are traditional learning, but the other theorists tend to prop up the convergent model. It made the child the center of education rather than the teacher. She builds off of Darwin by emphasizing the sensitive periods of programmed genetic awakenings. In this sense, she was a stage theorist, even though Piaget is really going to be the innovative stage theorist that we're going to be seeing in the coming weeks. She did look at these sensitive periods of order, details, use of hands, walking, and language. For order, she's similar to Ainsworth and the strange situation. But what she was saying was that similar to like imprinting, uh, babies have these sensitive periods that if they don't make an association with these abstract ideas, they may have developmental delays at some point. So a child has a natural inclination towards order, uh there's in the book they talk about how a visitor comes to the house and puts an umbrella on the table, and the child just starts crying, like uncontrollably crying, and they don't understand. And the mother realizes, well, the umbrella doesn't go on the table, it goes on the hook. So she puts the umbrella on the hook, and then all is well with the world. And we may see this as like, oh my god, like, why is she crying? Because we have to understand that during these very sensitive periods of growth, this is the universe to them. If the universe is out of order, the universe is upside down. That's it. So it's literally existential for babies as they're growing up. A sensitive period for details. And when we look at Werner later on, we'll look at Gestalts. But this idea that you'll show a kid a picture and they'll look at all the details in the background and not the what's in the foreground. I think this is related to, like, if you buy a gift for a child, they may not look at the big gift and they'll get caught up in the cardboard box, which will go back to productive play. But it's interesting how they'll get all caught up in the like know nothing box and not the big toy that was bought in the box. The sensitive period for hands, feeling, grasping, imagining. We're going to touch upon this again with Werner in a second. Sensitive period for walking, which in a sense is like a second birth. If you think about it, the baby was either carried or crawling. But when you're 2 inches off the ground and now you're 2 feet off the ground, all of a sudden it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world for you for you to discover. And then the sensitive period for language. And what's amazing about babies is that they'll start talking in like rapid full sentences at age 2. And it's crazy. Like, if you sit there for a second, like, my niece Gianna is, I think she's 2 or 3. It's bad that I don't know how old she is. But I'll just sit there and listen to her sometimes. And I'm like, how is she a philosopher? Like, some of the things that comes out of her mouth are just so interesting that you just sit there and you're like, man, why didn't I think of that? Like, it's some of the out of the mouth of babes, they say. Out of the mouth of babes is pretty amazing. Some of these intersections with Montessori and future theorist Chomsky, which will be late in the semester, but Chomsky is a linguistic, and he talks about language acquisition. He's actually the only theorist that is still alive out of all the theorists that we're going to study this semester. Freud will warn the parent to let the child fail within reason, of course. And Montessori is about the struggle. The struggle is good. Let the child struggle. But then at some point we have to guide him out of the struggle. But we guide him out. We don't pull him out. We let them be, because they have to be, because that's life. Life is a struggle, and they have to learn to live with the struggle. Piaget will talk about object permanence and how the child will come to grasp and feel an object and thus remember it. This is very interesting if you look at babies. So if they're sucking on a pacifier, and all of a sudden the pacifier drops out of their view, they're not sucking on it anymore, they'll start screaming like it's disappeared, because it has for them. Because if it's not touching them, it doesn't exist to them. But then they get to a point where they're able to abstract the object. So for example, we said it before last week, like, at the beginning, mommy is an extension of baby, and therefore if mommy leaves, oh my god, I'm gonna die. But as the kid gets older, as the child gets older, they're able to rationalize, okay, mommy's gonna leave, but mommy's gonna come back. And by doing that, they have this abstract idea of mommy. Mommy can go because mommy's in my head now. Mommy is here, even though she's over there. And then Piaget is gonna talk more about that when we get to him. Erickson will talk about autonomy very, very much. Out of all of the theorists, he's very big on autonomy. Werner, who we're going to get to in a second, with Gestalt psychology and the need to complete forms. We study Montessori because we stand on her shoulders. Montessori was one of the first to look at all these different things that future theorists end up running with. We already looked at the video, so we're going to skip over this. The basics of Werner. He was a Gestaltist. When we perceive whole forms or gestalts. The parts are not greater than the whole. We can't study the parts in isolation. We have to understand the parts in respect to the whole. What's interesting is that mental disorders may be present when we're not able to fill in those gaps. So in the textbook, they had like the broken triangle. If an individual cannot perceive that broken triangle as a whole triangle, mental disorder might be present. It's a whole nother thing. But I think it's interesting because Werner did work with individuals with mental disorders. He looks at orthogenesis, differentiation, and hierarchy integration, which are very key. Orthogenesis is about the correct order. And with it, changes in structure, and those changes are what we call differentiation. So, for example, everything has its developmental progression. So, an embryo is a whole. You know, a fertilized egg embryo is going to start developing, but it starts off as a glob, a body, one whole, and it gradually differentiates into parts that we can see. It will gradually differentiate into arms and legs, a head, and from the head will differentiate into parts. The arm will differentiate into parts. The leg will differentiate into parts. And then we have hierarchy integration, which is the development of corresponding rivulets of the synaptic connections and the ability to control the various parts of the body. So at first, everything is like all together, all at one, but as time goes on, I can work my legs separate from my arms. One of the things to think about it in reverse is that the specialization of the different parts of the body are so unique that if you consider, let's say a soldier who let's say loses their arms, and now they only have their legs, and now they have to teach their legs to do what their arms did, or their feet to do what their hands did, and there are people who succeed in doing this. That's like hierarchy integration in reverse, because our body has been so trained. Like our genetics, we naturally have trained our body to work our body in different ways that that it becomes very challenging to work it in reverse, like to have your feet function as a hand. Even though it's possible, it takes time to do it. With this, to understand Gestalt ideology, I just want to stop here and say this. Also think of Gestalt philosophy in terms of like medical specialization. We have eye doctors, we have ear, nose, and throat doctors, we have ear, nose, and throat hearing doctors, we have general practitioners, and we have orthopedic doctors. And even though they're specialists, they understand. If I go to my foot doctor My foot doctor understands that I'm not a foot. That's only one part of me. Now um he will not assume the role of the other specialist doctor in my life, but he has to understand how the foot fits into the whole in order to give me a proper diagnosis and a proper treatment for my foot. Even though he's not, um, I said last week how I have multiple sclerosis. Um, he's not a neurologist. But even though he's not a neurologist, he has to understand, how does my foot mobility, how is that affected by my multiple sclerosis? So Gestaltist philosophy is understanding that we cannot break things down into its parts and leave it there. We have to be able to understand it in the whole. This gets lost, however, in terms of science, because you will have specialist scientists, biologists, chemists, um, physicists. You have all of these specializations, and oftentimes they view the universe just from their point of view, and they kind of forget that the other sciences exist. Now, obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but my point is that um, because medicine is a little bit different than the other branches of science, like the body is the body is the body. So it's easy to see that integration overall. It's difficult to see that integration when you're looking at biology and chemistry and geology and looking how like the different sciences interact with each other, but they should be gestaltist in the sense of, at the end of the day, they all come together to help us understand this world and this universe that we live in. Microgenesis occurs when we're confronted with a new task, and there's like a when we get this new task, we activate prior knowledge, and then there's a quick development that happens. It's a like intense development that happens in those moments. We develop coordination in our attack plan. Um, there is confusion that may arise, that struggle. Remember, we're talking about the struggle when we're talking about Montessori, um, into differentiate like different ways of looking at it. But microgenesis and microgenesis mobility is this idea that when we're confronted with a new task, how can we activate our prior knowledge in order to move forward and progress in our development? Feminology is the idea that we must consider a child's subjective appreciation of things and how it appears to them. It's from their point of view. It's in their world, and we're walking with them. It's this idea that we're not the sage on the stage, we're the guide on the side, so to speak. We're joining them on the journey. Werner gave us the orthogenic principle, which we'll see again with Vygotsky. The orthogenic principle is the natural development of things, the differentiation and the hierarchical integration. And we ask ourselves, are children absorbing knowledge, or are they creating new ideas? Werner would say they're creating new ideas. That's just the natural development of things. The notion of incomplete gestalts is very seminal. He didn't give us gestalt psychology, but he leveraged it in his work, and we can use this to our advantage and use gestalt ideology as a means of approaching instruction, of looking at children attempting to close a circle, allowing them to say, like, oh, it's like a puzzle. I got to figure this out. I got to fill in the gaps, but let them fill in the gaps. Self-object differentiation. The child works to separate themselves from their surroundings. So just like we said, like mommy, baby, mommy, go away. Oh no, baby going to die. No, they're able to differentiate mommy's her own person. I am my own person, and I'm going to be okay. Piaget will have a lot to say about this with object permanence, and it's the beginnings of abstract thought. And as far as microgenetic mobility, we will come back with Piaget's disequilibrium model, the idea that we're in constant flux. Moving up the ladder of abstraction, we will see this repeatedly in theorists who follow. Consider this quote. I'll let you read it. You guys can read. You can pause this and read it on your own. Check out the lecture notes on the abstraction ladder. Initially, a child will view an area in personal terms in a very subjective way, and Montessori would agree, and she encouraged it. And this leads to abstract thinking leads to conceptual thinking. I wanted to share this with you, even though this is a little bit outside of the realm of the course. There was a section of Werner's application to mental health, and this is a great movie from 2017. It's called The Three Christs. I'm a little bit biased to this movie because it was recorded at my alma mater, Mount St. Vincent. And in the textbook, it talks about work with individuals with schizophrenia. This is a movie about three individuals who suffered from schizophrenia, and they all thought that they were Jesus Christ. And this doctor, what he decides to do is very controversial: put them all in a room and see what happens. But what was very Wernerian about it was that he was like, well, let them have it out. They think they're Jesus. Let them talk it out and see where they're at. And he observed them where they were at. So I just wanted to share this trailer with you. Always good with the movie suggestions of what you can watch at some point.
I arrived at Ypsilanti State Hospital, summer of 1959. I'd left teaching to begin an ambitious study of delusional patients. I would really like to help you, Joseph.
Please address me as my proper name, Jesus Christ, the righteous one am I.
I have three patients who believe they're Jesus Christ.
There can be but only one son of God.
That's my point.
Address me by my righteous name, God to you.
I want to put the three of them in a room and study their behavior. What do you think will happen? I don't have a clue. The reason I'm having these meetings is there can only be one Jesus. Only one God.
One God, two re-rise heads.
I'm shaking off all of your negativity and all of your squelches, all of your squelching. We do not have false hollowed out gods in Great Britain. Did our father send a boy to do a man's job? Knock it off. Knock it off! Alan, please be careful. It's impossible to really understand someone else's delusion. There are limits you can't exceed.
It's brave and important what you're doing. You decide if the gains outweigh the obvious risks.
Gentlemen, I want one of you to lead each of the meetings. I think we should have a vote. I nominate Joseph. Golf him. Unanimous.
Why do you want to work with paranoid schizophrenics?
Because it's so lonely. Jesus Christ. I be able to offer these men a means to find themselves.
Oh, screen sharing stopped. I think there's only like one slide left. Let's get back here. Next up, next week, it's going to be Piaget, chapter 6. Your first exam will be next week. I already posted the study guide for next week. I will post the exam to unlock on 9/19 and it will close on 9/25. Even though you will have a week to complete it, it will be a timed exam. So once you start it, you'll have about 2 hours to complete it. Excuse me, most students get it done in about 30 minutes. Take your time. Then the following week, 9/26 to 10/2, is going to be Kohlberg in chapter 7. So next week, we're going to be visiting one of the critical theorists, Piaget, which he will have predictions, stages at work in the classroom, and even here in the university class. Piaget is one of the wide theorists with widespread relevance and has had a lot of impact on the education field. Key questions to keep in mind as we encounter our stage theorists, of which Piaget is officially the first one. There's issues with stage theories, and we're going to look at them as we look at them. I want you to consider what's wrong about stage theories. What does any of this matter? Why should you care about these stages? And some general answers are provided there. I'm kind of curious how long this took. I hope that by combining the two of them, I kept it under 45 minutes. But we'll see. Have a good week, and I hope to talk to you soon.